Hello and welcome to my 100th subscriber extravaganza, and I thought I'd do something a little bit different this episode rather than do some gameplay. I thought I would review a TV series I watched recently, Love, Death and Robots, which you've probably already guessed from the title. It's a really good show. It's on Netflix, and it comprises 18 short animations, 18 short stories, and they last between, I think 17 minutes is the longest and 6 minutes is the shortest. And they're all based on pre-existing short stories that have all been adapted for the screen. But anyway, what I'm going to do is go through them one by one, give a few details and a few thoughts here and there. I will avoid spoilers, however. But to give you a bit of background about the programme, the series was actually created by a guy called Tim Miller. And Tim owns and set up a production company called Blur Studios that does special effects and animation. And in 2008 he was going to do a series based on 8 animated tales from Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal is a sort of science fiction, fantasy, horror type magazine, but that fell through for whatever reason, and all that went quiet till about 2016 when Tim became the director of Deadpool. And based on the success of Deadpool, I think he got some clout behind him and he managed to push this project forward. As I said, all these stories are based on existing short stories, but nearly all of them have been adapted for the screen by a guy called Philip Gelat. I had a quick look for Philip online, and he's done a few bits and pieces. He's got some writing and directing credits to his name, just on minor indie stuff, and I think he's also written some comic books as well. But I think he's done a pretty good job, I have to say, adapting these short stories for the screen. Anyhow, without further ado, let's go to our first story, which is Sonnie's Edge. And Sonnie's Edge is set in the future, where instead of boxing and sort of mixed martial arts, they have these sort of fighting competitions between creatures that have been created by genetic engineering. So you have like 2 players facing each other, and they all control these monsters with their mind and battle to the death. And one of the best players around is this woman called Sonnie, and she's approached by some local gangsters who want her to do something nefarious, but Sonnie refuses. And the outcome of her decision and what she does about it and how she gets out of the various scrapes she's put into forms the basis of the story. The animation style is very good. It's actually done by Blur Studios, which is the outfit Tim Miller set up. And I should mention this is based on a short story by a guy called Peter F. Hamilton. I enjoyed this episode quite a lot. I was a little put off initially by all the bad language in it because it is littered with F-bombs and C-words. I mean, I'm a big boy. I'm quite used to some swearing here and there, but there was so much it actually got my nerves the first time I watched this programme. I watched about 5 minutes of Sonnie's Edge and then went off and did something else. But I kept hearing how good the series was, so I came back to it. Yeah, and it turns out to be a really good story, actually. It's a proper twist to it. I think any good short story ends with a good twist, and a twist that you could perhaps half figure out yourself, given the information that the story delivers to you. Yeah, proper twist, nice and engaging, very good animation, and this is certainly in the top quarter of all the episodes in the series. So moving on, episode 2 is 3 robots, and as you might expect, it's about 3 robots, and they're sort of tourists basically. They're wandering around this wasteland, which is Earth. Humanity's been wiped out, and it's essentially the story is the robots going around just sort of picking through various bits of debris they find, talking about humans and how funny we were. But at the end of the day, they do actually find out why humans were wiped out. It's quite a funny ending, very unexpected. As I said, it's quite a light-hearted episode. You couldn't have guessed the ending at all from the information presented. But no, it's a good little episode, this. Again, I like the animation style. I quite like the characterization of the robots. There is a bit of a lag in the middle, because right at the beginning of the episode, you're introduced to the 3 robots, gradually get to know them, which is quite interesting. Then there's a little bit too much wandering around, to be honest with you. It lags in the middle as they just sort of goofing around here and there. But it all leads to a very interesting conclusion. Again, this is another very good episode, which I'd put in the top quarter. And this one was based on a short story by John Scalzi, and we see his name later on some other episodes. I think he's written about 2 or 3 of these. Number 3, The Witness. This is slightly different in that this wasn't based on a pre-existing short story. This is actually an original work written by Alberto Mielgo, I think his name is. A very stylish episode, and perhaps the sexiest of all the episodes. It's set in some vaguely dystopian future city. It's a bit like a sort of watered down Blade Runner, not so dark and rainy though. And our heroine is an exotic dancer who witnesses a murder in a building on the opposite side of the street. The murderer knows he's been spotted and he chases her through the town. She manages to get away, and then she goes to a club to do her exotic dancing. All very sexy, I have to say. Of course, things aren't that easy. The murderer hasn't been shaken off quite as successfully as she thought, and things resolve in a rather bloody way. There's a big twist at the end of this one, which is very unexpected. There's no way you could have guessed it. But it's very good. The animation style is fantastic on this. It oozes sex appeal throughout. There's a lot of casual nudity with this young woman running through the town, partially clothed most of the time. And the scenes in the club are really quite kinky. Very, very good episode. I enjoyed this. The ending is weird, and it raises more questions than it answers. But well worth anyone's time watching this. I think this is quite a fan favourite. I see a lot of fan art associated with this episode. Right, a very different kettle of fish is number 4, which is Suits. It's set in a world that looks like the Midwest, basically. You've got this peaceful farming community that's suddenly invaded by these, I think they're giant insects, or they might be giant robot insects, I'm not sure. But whatever they are, they're very nasty. But the locals are apparently quite used to these bastards turning up. They have to evacuate their farming settlement, get them to safety. And while all the non-combatants are heading for this bunker, you get a few of the farmers get into these huge mechanised suits and then start blasting away at the insect invaders. Yeah, I like this one a lot. It's very exciting from the start. Draws you in straight away. There's no messing around. I like the animation style too. It's quite cartoony, but I really enjoyed it. Good characterisation. And there is a surprise ending. Again, it's nothing you'd really sort of guess by watching it all. But no, it's an interesting little twist. It sort of turns the whole situation on its head, which I don't think is giving too much away. And I should mention that this was written by a guy called Stephen Lewis, and again, adapted by Philip Gelat. Next up is number 5, Sucker of Souls, and this is really our first dud. This is really quite a poor episode. It's a shame. It's written by someone called Kirsten Cross, and it's about this gang of mercenaries who are accompanying these scientists into these ancient ruins. And while the scientists are poking around in the ancient ruins, they uncover some untold horror from the past. So it's a story you've heard and seen a million times, really. Not terribly original. The animation style is not great, I have to say. It's a bit Saturday morning cartoon. It doesn't look like too much effort went into it. And a lot of the characters are quite annoying, and there's especially there's this one woman who's like this Cockney girl who blows things up, and she's really quite the most irritating person you've ever met. I think she's meant to be the comic relief, but she's just annoying. And about 30 seconds after you meet her, you just want her to drop dead, frankly, which she does, I'm glad to say. There's also, I mean, there is a twist in this story, but it's not a good one. It's just basically, how to put it, our expectations are not met, let's put it like that. And there's a massive plot hole in it, in that while they're poking around the ruins, they find something which helps them fight off this ancient evil initially. Then they run away from the ancient evil, then they meet something very, very similar, but the thing that saved them the first time doesn't save them the second time, and it makes no sense whatsoever. So it was really quite irritating. Yeah, it's just a shame, really, but it's quite a hackneyed story that has no internal logic, and irritating characters, and the story is fairly dull, really, considering the subject matter. You'd expect it to be a lot better. Number 6 is When the Yogurt Took Over, and I thought initially from the title this would be quite a silly billy episode and not worth my time. It's actually the shortest, I think, of all the episodes. It's only 6 minutes long, and it's written by John Scalzi, who also did 3 Robots. This one is surprisingly profound in its own way. It's actually really good. There's a twist at the end, which is quite thought-provoking. So the story basically is sentient yogurt taking over the earth, which sounds horrible. I won't say any more than that, but this is a damn fine little story. The animation style isn't something that I like, but no, it's well done. A really nice, well done, interesting little story. Very, very good. I would easily put this in the top half of all the episodes. Number 7 is Beyond the Aquila Rift. This gets a lot of attention. I've been seeing lots of people writing about this one. It's also, of all the ones we've seen so far, this is the first story that has what I would call sort of like photorealistic animation, in that it's very hard to tell this from, sort of real life actors, actresses, etc. So this episode is set in the future where people can travel huge distances in their spaceships by going through these portals, but you have to go to suspended animation, so everyone has to get into a pod, and that puts you to sleep, and then you wake up a few hours later on the other side of the galaxy or wherever. So anyway, the crew of this ship all go to sleep, get in their pods, the ship goes into the portal, and they're whipped off somewhere. But when they wake up, the captain is the only one who's revived. And it turns out that the person who's revived him happens to be an old girlfriend of his. Quite an odd coincidence. And she gives him various excuses as to why the other people who are in suspended animation shouldn't be woken up. She and him sort of hit it off, they rekindle their relationship. But even though he and she sort of hit it off again, he knows something isn't right. And he's perfectly correct in that, something is very horribly wrong. And finding out what has gone wrong is the finale of the story. I've read an awful lot of science fiction, and I've seen stories very similar to this quite a few times, so the whole idea behind this is a bit of a science fiction trope. But it's done very well. The resolution is quite shocking. Basically a very good science fiction story all round. I'd definitely rank this in the top half, if not the top quarter of all these episodes. At number 8 we have Good Hunting, which is quite a curious mixture really. It starts off set in this sort of rural Chinese landscape where you've got people battling mythical monsters, etc. But the idea is that sort of magic is dying in the world and it's been replaced by technology. But the technology that is replacing everything is steampunk technology. So you've got this Chinese guy whose father was a monster hunter, who is drawn to Hong Kong and all the technological marvels going on there. Yeah, it's an interesting story. Again, I won't go into too many details for fear of spoiling it for you. But it's basically how the magic of technology replaces the magic of folklore. However, I will say that there is so much stuffed into this story. It's not really a short story. It's more the précis of a full-length novel. There is so much crammed into this. And there is no twist at the end, really. It is more or less a condensed novel. It's like one of those Reader's Digest abridged novels you used to get. The story's good. I like the animation. But I have to say, I don't really think this belongs in a collection of short stories. It's not a short story. It's a novel. Yeah, just compressed. Anyway, that was Good Hunting with the original story by Ken Liu. I think that's how you pronounce it. Next up is number 9, The Dump. Again, another change in pace. This one is sort of funny, I suppose. It's funny and horrific. It's all about this old guy who's, I think the character's name is Ugly Dave. But Ugly Dave lives in a giant rubbish tip on the outskirts of this town. One day one of the city planners comes along and says that, well, the dump's got to go because we want to expand the town. We've got lots of buildings we want to put up here. And Dave then tells this guy about an incident at the dump some time ago where he found something unusual, shall we say, living amongst all the piles of rotting debris, etc. And the thing he describes does solve Dave's problems for him in quite a gruesome fashion. This is quite a short one. It's only about, I think, 10 minutes. There's a lot of people online who hate this. I don't know why. I think it's quite funny. I mean, the story is nothing to write home about, to be honest with you. It's just basically Dave telling this rather peculiar tale. And the ending isn't really twisty at all. But I love the animation style. I think there's really good characterization here. I like the city planner. I really like Dave, the way Dave's been put together. And there's also another friend that we meet as part of Dave's flashback who's done really well. So that's The Dump, written by Joe Lansdale. Next we have number 10, Shapeshifters. This is written by Marco Clues. And again, this one's a little bit of a dud too, unfortunately. It's a really interesting premise. The idea is that we're in a sort of parallel universe where werewolves have joined the United States military. So you've got these soldiers who are werewolves going out on patrols with US troops in Afghanistan or wherever. And that's about it, really. I mean, something happens, something unpleasant happens, and then one of the werewolf soldiers has to go out and deal with a situation. But there's no real twist to it. I mean, the twist would have been that we find out these people are werewolves, but obviously we know that right from the start, and the title is Shapeshifters, which gives it away a little bit. It seemed a bit of a waste, this one, I have to say. And I was also a little bit irritated by the way the other soldiers treated the werewolves. Because the other soldiers were, sort of really hated them, you're not sitting with us, dogman, etc, etc. Whereas I don't think that's what would happen in real life at all. If I was in the army and there was werewolves serving with me, I'd be really quite pleased they were on my side for a start. I'd also think they were really cool. I think these werewolf soldiers would be really, really popular. So the fact that they're sort of, treated as second-class citizens, it is a bit bogus, and it's only done to raise the tension, really. It feels a bit artificial. It's an interesting story. I mean, I enjoyed watching it, but when it's over, you think it's a little bit of a nothing burger, unfortunately. So coming in at number 11 is Helping Hand, and this was written by Claudine Griggs. Again, another photorealistic animation episode. This is pretty good, actually. Nice hard science fiction story. Basically, you've got this lone lady repair person in her little spaceship going out repairing satellites. Something unpleasant happens, and she has to get out of this sort of sticky situation. I can't say any more than that. It's well done. There is a little bit of slight false dilemma, I think. When the unpleasant thing happens, she's got quite a lot of air, but she only figures out what to do when she's got about a minute of air left, so it's a little bit forced. We know she's in trouble, she doesn't need sort of low oxygen to add to it all. So I thought that was a little bit melodramatic. But again, brilliant animation, brilliant photorealistic animation, nice little story, and it was good to see someone solving a difficulty using some hard physics. So yeah, very good. I enjoyed Helping Hand a lot. Next we have Fish Night, number 12, and this is written by Joe Lansdale, who also did The Dump. This is quite a psychedelic episode. I can't go into too many details for fear of spoiling it for you. Suffice to say, you've got these two salesmen who get stuck out in the desert, and then some fish come along. But I can't tell you where the fish come from or what they're doing, because that would ruin it. It's just a really visually arresting episode. It's quite psychedelic. It's almost like these two guys took mescaline or something, which I don't think is the point of the story. It is spoilt slightly by the fact that one of the people does something quite stupid. It's like these rotten horror films where the young woman hears creepy sounds coming from the axe murderer's house and goes to investigate. And you think, well, if you're that stupid, you deserve everything that's coming to you, frankly. And one of the characters in this does something slightly similar. But that's all I'll say about Fish Night. It looks pretty good. There's no real twist, to be honest with you. Something does happen, something quite dramatic. But a fairly middling episode, I have to say. If it wasn't for the visuals, I don't think the story would be enough to carry it by itself. At number 13, we have a story called Lucky 13, and this is written by Marco Clues, who also did The Shapeshifters, so it's another military-themed episode. And Lucky 13 is about an army transport ship, again a futuristic army transport ship that is carting around these marines to various firefights, etc. The name Lucky 13 is meant to be quite ironic because the ship has managed to kill every crew it's had until we get this new pilot comes along, and she sort of develops a rapport with Lucky 13. She flies with it for a long time and it gets her out of a few scrapes here and there until ultimately it doesn't. I won't describe the ending. It's a sort of a surprise. It's not a very good one though. The story's not brilliant, and I don't think it's helped that it's all told in flashback, so it's not really a surprise that she survives at the end of the day because she's telling you the story in hindsight. But despite all that, it's quite exciting, I suppose. Again, more photorealistic animation, which is a really superb quality, very, very good indeed. A completely different kettle of fish is number 14, which is Zima Blue. Again, this seems to be another fan favourite. I see lots and lots of people talking about this one. And Zima is the name of an artist who has specialised in using this particular shade of blue. And Zima makes these huge art installations, like these artists who sort of cover whole islands in curtains and things like this. Well, Zima does similar stuff, but on like a planetary scale. But after achieving fame and fortune, he's gone off and become a bit of a recluse, until he invites this journalist along to interview him and to witness his most recent, and it turns out his final, art performance. And as part of that performance, you find out where Zima came from, his origins, and where he's going. And it's a good little story, I have to say. It's quite thought-provoking, the ending. Very good indeed. Although I have to say, I think the best thing about this episode is the art style, which is very stylised. really fantastic looking piece, I have to say. It's really quite a feast for the eyes. The only thing that lets it down slightly, in my opinion, is it perhaps thinks it's a little bit more important than it really is. I mean, it's got a thoughtful ending, but it's not as profound as it would like, I don't think. But that's Zima Blue by Alastair Reynolds, who also did the story Beyond the Aquila Drift. But overall, yep, very, very good episode, easily within the top quarter. Next up is number 15, Blindspot. This is another dud, I'm afraid. It's not very good. You've got this small gang of cyborgs, basically, and they look like Transformers. The whole animation vibe is a very Saturday morning cartoon. And these cyborgs are chasing this truck. It's just like a heist movie, essentially. And the whole story is them robbing this truck. And yeah, there is a twist at the end, but it's pretty pathetic, really. It's not brilliant at all. It's sort of exciting. I mean, you do get to watch a robbery and they've got some problems to overcome, but you're not really invested in any of the characters because you don't know anything about them and don't really care what happens to them, to be honest with you. Anyhow, this particular story wasn't adapted. It was an original story by Vitaly Shusko, and he shouldn't have bothered, really, because it's not very good at all. More promising is the next one, number 16, which is Ice Age. This is quite a fun little story. It's about this couple who move into this new apartment, discover an old-fashioned fridge, and while they're cleaning out the fridge, or the freeze box, whatever you'd call it in America, they find this ice cube with a little woolly mammoth in it. They then determine that their icebox is home to this tiny civilization. And essentially, if you've ever watched that episode of The Simpsons where Lisa grows a little civilization in a petri dish, then you'll understand this story completely. There's very little to say about it beyond that. It is quite funny though, it's a funny little story, and I really like the couple's reaction to finding this civilization, that they're completely unfazed and they treat it like a television program, more or less. And what also threw me about this episode was that the man and the woman are real life actors, and I was sort of staring at the screen thinking this sort of photorealistic animation was really, really good. Well, in fact, they're real people. I think it just goes to show how good the standards are that I wasn't really sure whether I was looking at real people or not. It was extraordinary. So anyway, Ice Age by Michael Swanwick. A really nice little episode. Yeah, I mean, a middling though, I have to say. It's not one of the best, but far from being one of the worst. However, our next instalment at number 17 is definitely one of the worst, and this is Alternate Histories. And this is supposedly the demo video of some app that can generate alternate histories. And in this we see 6 alternate histories showing Adolf Hitler dying in different ways. And really, by the time you're halfway through number 3, you just want it to end. It's quite frantic and stupid, and it doesn't really build to anything. It's just really quite annoying, this episode. And this was written by John Scalzi, who was also responsible for When the Yogurt Took Over, which I liked, and 3 Robots, which is pretty good. So I'm afraid John dropped the ball on alternate histories, because this is just quite irritating and silly, and really not worth your time, even the 7 minutes it'll take you to watch it. And last up we have Secret War, which is quite exciting. It's set in 1919 in Siberia, and we see this group of Russian soldiers who come across this village, which has been ravaged by some unspeakable evil. And we do find out what the unspeakable evil is and where it came from, and the poor old Russian soldiers have to try and beat back this horrifying menace. And there is no particular twist at the end of this, there's no surprise. I mean, it ends in a quite dramatic way, but it's not what I'd call a short story. This is really the prologue, I'd say, to a quite exciting video game. It looks like an extended cutscene from a video game, and one which I'd enjoy playing, but it is the prologue to another story rather than a short story itself. But yeah, quite entertaining, and the animation is fantastic. It's really crisp and sharp. And if I had a video game with animation of that quality, I'd be very, very pleased indeed. Anyhow, that's it. That's all of them. Hope you enjoyed that. So even if you've seen all these episodes, I think it's always quite interesting to hear what someone else thinks about these things. And if you've not watched Love, Death and Robots, then hopefully this has whetted your appetite. Yeah, it's a really good little series, and once you get into it, it's very Moorish. You'll watch one and you think, oh, I'll just watch one more, then one more, then one more, and you soon burn through them. And I've only watched the series once so far, but I'm definitely going to go back and watch them all again, even the crappy ones. Anyway, I hope you didn't mind this foray into something a little bit different, because I've never done a review like this before. But next time round I'll be back to the gameplay, and I hope you'll join me in watching those. So again, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to see you again soon. Until I do, I shall say goodbye. Okay, cheerio.